welcome back. This is a big video. This is where we start to bring everything together. And we've covered a lot of ground. But before we go any further, let's keep the momentum going and do a super quick recap. Remember, we talked about the change model, and that was used to help us better understand how human beings make decisions towards change. Then we talked about how red flag converted that change model into the iconic red flag compass. And then we used the compass to get rid of the old model, that sales cycle for moving from left to right. And we created something called the red flag playing field. So we took that linear model and created 3 quadrants. And now that we have our playing field, the 3 quadrants in place, let's dive into those quadrants 1, 2, and 3, and get a better understanding of them. We're going to start to break the quadrants down. And here's where I begin to teach you what's unique about each quadrant. Keep in mind, I'm not going to teach you how to navigate them, not just yet. This video series is not designed to teach you what to do in each quadrant, but instead heighten your awareness around each of the differences found in each of the quadrants. This is the fastest path for you to learn how to change your game. Think about it this way. It's hard to adjust how you will behave in each quadrant if you still find it difficult to discern the differences within each quadrant. You need to fully understand what makes each quadrant unique before you start to begin thinking about how you're going to behave differently in each one. Trust me, your thinking will drive your behavior. I'll teach you what to do in another video series, and I'll teach you how to do it with what we call the red flag playbook. The playbook is essentially how to conduct 3 vital conversations to getting clients faster and with less effort. And yep, you guessed it. Each conversation will map to its own quadrant. More on the 3 conversations later. For now, let's get back to understanding the quadrants, the basics that make each quadrant unique. And we'll do this by starting with quadrant 1. The first part of the playing field. We begin by pointing out that the buyer's motivation in quadrant 1 for change is extremely low. For multiple reasons, there's just not a big desire. There's not a real desire to do anything differently than what they're currently doing. Regardless of the reason, they have found the fact is the motivation for change is low, and it's your job to elevate that motivation towards change. Here's what it sounds like in quadrant 1. The prospective buyer is saying, I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied with my estate plan. Does this something like this sound familiar? If so, these are sound bites coming from quadrant 1. And you need to be able to discern the difference. You need to be able to quickly recognize these things so you know where the game is being played. So in quadrant 1, here's a pro tip. It's your job to help them uncover any potential roadblocks to what they're looking to achieve. And if you do that effectively, you'll now be on the path to creating a real opportunity to create client value. And you also will be on the path to quadrant 2. Let me remind you, in this video, my goal is to familiarize you with a new way of thinking and approaching your sales meetings. This series is not designed to teach you what to do in each of these quadrants. Let's get back at it. Let's discuss what's unique in quadrant 2. What's unique about quadrant 2, this position on the compass, is the buyer's motivation for change. That's the telltale. It's slightly elevated than it was over in quadrant 1. In quadrant 2, the buyer's awareness of the problem is heightened, but they aren't convinced they need to do something differently. Urgency for change is not real high for your prospective client. Here's what it sounds like in quadrant 2. The prospective buyer is saying something like this. I'm aware I should probably change. I'm aware I should probably change what I'm doing, or I know I should be doing something differently, but you know what? I've got time for that. Does this sound like something familiar? If so, these are sound bites coming from quadrant 2. And over time, here's my promise. You'll develop a heightened awareness and you'll get better at discerning the differences between what you're hearing in each of these quadrants. The point is you need to be able to discern the differences. You need to quickly recognize these sound bites so you know where the game is being played. Here's a pro tip. The fact that someone is aware of a problem does not give us the green light to jump across the compass and start a proposal safari. It doesn't give us the green light to put our capes on and save the day by giving advice and recommendations. We talked about what happens when we jump across the compass. We hijack how people make decisions towards change. And we learned that that predictably creates stalled deals and client procrastination. And that costs you money. So when I teach you what to do in each quadrant, you'll learn to navigate change by going around the compass in a clockwise fashion. You'll never cut across the compass. And by the way, quadrant 2, this is the one the advisors tend to skip the most. Well, let's move to quadrant 3. When we examine the differences in quadrant 3, what you'll notice is that the desire, the motivation for change is at its absolute highest. If you went through the other 2 quadrants properly, quadrants 1 and 2, when you get to quadrant 3, the buyers are now acknowledging their problems and the impact if they stay status quo. In other words, they're acknowledging the need for change from what they're currently doing to what you're recommending. They're saying, I know my current plan is broken. I know there's a better way. And I know if I don't change, there's going to be a heavy cost to it. See, they're acknowledging all that. They're acknowledging the cost, the consequences, and the risks of associating with not change. Here's a pro tip. Once your prospective client has this cadence, you now can finally talk about your advice. You can put your cape on and save the day. You can deliver your advice and recommendations and the solutions you offer. So here it is. Here's what I want you to do with all of this. Let's loop back to the performance archetypes. If you want to raise the bar and start playing the game at a higher level, you need to, number 1, understand your archetype. Are you a benefits communicator or are you a change navigator? Number 2, use the compass and the playing field and the quadrants that we just discussed to help you pave the way to becoming a change navigator. Let's go back and quickly review the differences now that you have some of this in context. Benefits communicators, they focus on the point of presentation. That's a quadrant 3 activity. They have a tendency to spend most of their time preparing what to present. That's a quadrant 3 activity. They believe the sale is made during the point of presentation. That's a quadrant 3 activity. They value giving information. They see the entire sales cycle as one stage. In other words, there's no playing field. And they communicate the benefits of ownership. They're jumping to quadrant 3. They're putting the cape on. And by contrast, you got the change navigator. They introduce their work through the problems they solve. This is quadrant 1 activity. They have an awareness of each evolution, quadrants 1, 2, and 3. Why change? Why change now? Why with you? Change navigators believe the sales made before the point of presentation. That's a quadrant 1 and 2 activity. And they value giving information equally with getting information. And they see the sales cycle from the time they meet somebody to the time they decide to work with you in terms of 3 evolutions. This is not a single journey. They see it in 3 quadrants, quadrants 1, 2, and 3. And they're masters. Change navigators are masters at communicating the cost, the consequence, and risk in the absence of ownership. That's quadrant 2. And they focus on a decision-making process, not a buying process, a decision-making process. So at this point in the videos, what you should have started to see is all this come together. Remember, the game of sales is just that. It's a game. And hopefully this series shed a new light, a new perspective, and even maybe a new way of thinking about your craft and how it's played and how it's won. In the next video, join me and I'll spend just a few minutes. We'll spend them together and we'll do a brief recap. So get fired up and get going and visit me on the next video. Let's do this.